Hello there, welcome back to this C++ series. Today we're going to continue talking about control structures. Yesterday we talked about if else statements. I don't know, whichever time you're watching this anyways. We're going to continue talking about control structures. So we're going to talk about the switch case. As you can see, I'm using Visual Studio Code. I've just called my file case.cpp. Again, what you call the file doesn't matter. What matters is the file extension. .cpp just means .c++. So you're telling the compiler that C++ file. You can write the same code in dev depending on your preference. I like Visual Studio Code. Right, so switch case statements. I'm just going to write the basic structure of a C++ program. Include IOStream. And don't forget to add the comments. So whenever you're even writing your exams, you're going to be writing your code by hand, not with your PC. So you have to make sure you know all this, and it's just helpful to add a comment what your program is going to do, just so to let you know what you're doing. And if there's a part of the code you think could be hard to understand, maybe a naming of variables and stuff, just add comments. Don't add too many of them because they may distract the code. But then it's helpful to add your comments for this program. Sorry, I just saw that. Come, switch case statements. So I'm going to carry out this small exercise. I'm going to get a numerical value of a number, and I'm going to print out the alpha numerical. That's going to be in words. I'm going to print it out in words. Right. So let's say int number, and the user is going to enter a number, right? So it's going to enter a number. Now you can do this with if else statements. I want to try to do it with the switch case statements. So just explain the switch case. I'll use an example and then explain that. Right. So you're going to ask the user to enter a number. So I'm going to say, please enter a number. And seeing they're going to enter a number. Now you declare that in top there. Create a number like that. I'm going to use switch. So that's how I use the switch case statement. Switch number. Okay. And then you open your bracket. So in here you're going to have different cases. I think of it as maybe a law student and you have different cases, right? So depending on the case, maybe it's been there before, you have to refer back to what was the previous judgment and all stuff like that. I wish I was a law student, but I'm not. So I'm not going to explain much on that. But depending on the case, you make a decision. So you try out the cases. So the cases are going to be suggestions of what this number can be, and then if it's any of those suggestions, you make a decision. So we're going to try it and see what it works. So we're going to say case one, full colon. That's how it works. So you have a case, the option, and a full colon. Right. So case one means if the number is one. Now, if you are carrying out an if else statement, it's going to be if number is equal to one. Right, that means the same as number case one. As you can see here, I have more things to write here than if you are. So many programmers prefer using the switch case, although it's not always preferable. I'm going to mention out a few cases when it's not recommended to use a switch case, right? But it just makes the code look cleaner sometimes. And if case one, we're just going to say start the number you entered is one. Alright, at the end of every case, you have a break statement. Just forgot something there. Cool. So at the end of every case, you have a break statement. Don't forget that row importance. So you can move on to the next case. So let's say case 2. Then you can say cout. The number you entered is 2. Alright, and you break. So again, at the end of every case, you break with the break statement. Case 3, you can say cout. The number you entered is 3. You can keep on going up to forever. As you can see, it's going to get boring. Don't forget to add your break statement to the end of that. But then after all your statements, the last thing you add is a default option. So not compulsory that you add a default option. The default is going to work no matter what case you have. So I'm just going to say have a great day. Because at the end of every C++ file, it's recommended to add return zero so that you know where your file is ending or your main function is ending. Not recommend, not compulsory, just recommended. So I've saved that. I'm going to compile and run it. I'm just going to go to terminal, new terminal, and I'm just going to compile it. So that's how you compile a code in Visual Studio Code. Alright, and to run it, just say a.exe. Please enter a number. I'm going to enter 3. It's going to tell me the number you entered is 3. So as you can see, it's working the same as the if else statements we used yesterday. It's just that it looks a bit cleaner than the if else statements. So that's how you use the switch case statements. Now, switch case statements can only be used, or they're recommended to be used only when you have. So I'm just going to say only when you have integers and characters. Right, characters. They're not recommended to use when you have strings and doubles being floating point numbers. Not recommended to use switch case statements because if you have a number as 4.0 and 4, these are going to be different numbers to the computer. This is about 16 bits. This is about only 8 bits. So they're going to be very different numbers. And making comparison with doubles, maybe you may have the 4, but then you have 4.0 in the case. It's not going to work. Your code is going to crash. It's just going to give you an error, which you don't want. So it's recommended to only use integers and characters. Again, you can't use a string. You can use a string if you want to, but then there's differences in spelling. Let's say, for example, yes and yes are going to be two different things. Okay, which is going to be different from yes and yes. And as you get the point, you can't ignore a case, and the computer doesn't really know how to ignore. Or in programming languages like Java, you can, I think even C++ with some libraries, you can use ignore case. That means just ignore the case. That changes everything to one case, maybe uppercase, lowercase, so you can make a comparison. Then it's not that easy to do. So it only works well if you only have characters and integers. Now let's try one with characters. Let's say I want to know maybe months of the year. I'm going to enter a character which starts the month, and it's going to give me an option. So I'd have a problem with June and July. So let's try another problem. Um, I'm just going to enter options. Maybe let's say the keys, you're making a game and it's arrow keys, right? So let's try. So I'm going to say character. Equate key, right? And I'll say you didn't have to ask the user to enter the character. It can be anything. Let's say W. And let's say W is for moving up, right? Okay. I know. Let me ask the user. Let's imagine I'm making a game. It's a snake game, simple game. Just using arrow keys. I'm going to use the character keys. So CN, you enter key. Now, of course, the user isn't going to get what they have to do next. So you just ask them, please enter a key. Press a key. Right, so for now, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to tell them the key they pressed. In a game, you may use that information to carry out some other tasks, like maybe moving the character to the right, to left, or make a jump and stuff like that. But anyways, so you use the switch case statements again. You get switch key case. If the key entered is A, you're just going to tell the user cout. You entered A, and they are like moving to the next line. Break case. If the key entered is that, you're going to say cout. Don't forget add your break case R. I'm going to say cout, you enter R, and you break. You can enter, you don't have to add a default statement. It's not compulsory that you do, it's just recommended. Right, I can go on up to all the characters, but I'm sure by now you get the gist. So let's try it out. I'm going to save it and I'm going to run it. Alright, so I'll just compile it again because I added new code. Please enter a number. I'm going to enter 5. It's not part of the option, so it's going to say have a great day. Press the key R. You entered R. Alright, that should work. Now I'm going to try out. Maybe I'm going to enter 1. The key, the number I entered is 1. Press the key. Right? You enter W. Now, if you enter an option which is not coded for in the switch case, it's not going to work. It's just going to skip that whole block of code because none of the cases there. So enter number, let's say 7. Here I added the default, so it's going to tell me to have a great day. Enter key, let's say Y. Y isn't part of those. So I've just entered Y and it's closed immediately. Alright, now that's about the switch case statement. Let's try one last exercise and let's make a calculator with a switch case statement. You can still make a calculator with the if else statements. Just going to be boring. It's a bit nice to make it with a switch case. I'm just going to click calculator.cpp and here we go. So we say this program makes a simple calculator. Right, so here goes. Include iostream using namespaces to the intmen. Now I may need some double starting numbers. I'll call them sum, difference, product, and quotient. So again, remember in our first lesson or in our second lesson, I said you can put a variables like that in one single line. You can make a multiple declaration. You don't have to always. Then if you want, you can even initialize them and give them initial values. Let's say this can be 0, 0.0. Okay. Or just 0 if you want to add the points and it's 1. But sure. We're going to give the user a few options. So let's just create them. Welcome to our calculator. There goes, I'm going to say out, enter an option. I think I'd like them to enter 2 numbers first. They can be any kind of numbers. I'm just going to say sub double number 1 and number 2. Number 2. Now that's boring to write numbers like that, but then it's also recommended to use descriptive variable names. Okay, N1 and N2. I'm just going to say enter a number. I'm not going to add that. I'm just going to say they're going to enter N1 and see out, enter another number. Cin, they're going to enter N2. Yeah, then from there I ask them what kind of action they'd like to perform. So I'm going to say cout, or what would you like to do? If you notice, this is going to be similar to an Airtel Money app or mobile money app. Yes, it gives you options. Depending on your options, you'll get an output. We're going to do that when we start doing functions, because in my opinion, it's a bit easier to do it when you have functions or just blocks of code. You can just call them over and over again, functions and loops, of course. But for now, this is, so we're giving the user a few options. That's going to be NDL. So cout, I'm just going to say 1 add. I'm going to just copy this block of code here. I'll copy it 4 times. C2 is going to be subtract. C3 is going to be multiply. And C4 is going to be divide. Of course, by division, we have to check if one of the numbers is 0 or not. We can still do that. So I'm going to make a variable. It's going to be an integer. And it's going to be the user's response. So again, it's recommended to put your variables on top, but you can always put them anywhere. As we saw in the GPT app we made, we could put our variable declarations anywhere. So we have to say C in response. Okay, that's going to be the response, and I'm going to use a switch case statement. So I'm going to say switch the response. Right, so case 1 means the response is the first one. You want to add the numbers, so I'm just going to say start. No. Before I do that, I made a variable, so I'm just going to say sum is equal to n1 plus n2. So I just say start. The sum of the numbers is the sum, the variable we just made. Don't forget to add a break statement. Alright, and then I'm going to say case 2, the option is 2, and subtract, so I'm going to say the difference is going to be equal to n1 minus n2. I'm just going to say start difference of the numbers is this variable we just made, and quote difference. And now I'm going to say break. Don't forget to add a break statement. I'm going to try out my new case 3. The product made is going to be equal to n1 times n2. I can just say see out the product of the numbers. Goodness. Is product. And now don't forget to break. Then I'm going to try my last case 4. Now you can use if else statements in a switch case statements you're going to work. So just check if either n1 or if either n1 is equal to 0 or n2 is equal to 0. I'm going to say cout valid input. Alright. And else, now we wouldn't want to divide by 0, so that's why we're just making sure we check. So else, I'm going to say the quotient is equal to n1 divided by n2. Right. I'm just going to say cout the quotient to the numbers is quotient. There's also an extra step I've added. You don't have to add it. You can always go the way I've done everything else without having to check, but then you're going to get an error if one of the numbers is 0. Cool. And then at the end of that, don't forget to add a break, and you can even add a default statement if you want. So if you haven't did any of the options there, just say cout option not recognized. Right, that should work. At the end, just add return 0. This is not compulsory, so as recommended. The code is still going to work even if you don't add return 0. Alright, just make sure I save that. I'm just going to expand my terminal a bit. Okay, that should be a bit cool. So I'm just going to say g++, spell out the correct name of the file, calculated CPP. I'm just going to say a.exe. So welcome to our calculator. We'll enter number 5, enter another number 2. What should you like to do? I think I'd like to add them. The sum of the numbers is 7. Let's try out. I'm going to enter number 4 and another one 2. I'd like to multiply them. Okay. The difference of the numbers is 2. Something I've noticed I didn't check out. I didn't change these options. I'm going to change them. I'm going to put 3. I'm going to put 4. Alright, cool. That should work now. Of course it's working, just didn't look nice. So I'm going to compile it again. Just change. Alright, so enter number. I'm going to enter 6 and 7. What should you like to do? I would like to divide. That's 4. The concept of the numbers is that. Now let's try to check if our checking works. One of the numbers is going to be 0, so I'm going to enter 7 and 0. And I'll try to divide. Okay, invalid input because one of the numbers is 0. Right, everyone, that is introduction to switch case statements. Hope it makes sense and happy coding.